Alright, I'm going to show you guys how to make my grandmother's dark chocolate cake recipe. So I start by preheating my oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and I grease the bottom of a 9 by 13 pan, and I put in a bit of parchment paper onto the bottom. Now, what you're going to see is me making a double batch because I'm making a 2-layer cake. The ingredients below are for a single layer, so I just kind of doubled everything. But first we're going to start with our dry team and sift it together. The dry team is going to be 1 3/4 cups flour, 2 cups of sugar, a 3/4 cup of cocoa powder, 1½ teaspoons of baking soda, 1½ teaspoons of baking powder, and 1 tablespoon of salt. Typically I'll use kosher salt just because of it works better in these kind of things. Now, because I'm making a double batch, I couldn't fit it in my sifter, so I just used a whisk and just combined thoroughly here in my big bowl. Something to remember that a tablespoon is actually 3 teaspoons. So for my double recipe, I needed 1 1/2 teaspoons each of baking soda and baking powder. So doubling that would actually be a tablespoon each of those. So you can kind of cheat the system there too. Make your life a little bit easier if you know that measurement. And as you saw by what I showed you, a teaspoon has 5 milliliters while a tablespoon is 15. So it is just 3 times. So this is me just thoroughly mixing it all together, making sure it's a good consistency and homogeneous as possible. This is me prepping my pans and the parchment paper because I'm making 2 layers, like I said. Squish it down, make sure I get all the sides. Repeat. Grandma's cookbook in the background. Shout out to Grandma. Alright, so now we're going to start working on the wet team side of things. So what I like to do is I measure things down to the meniscus, something I learned in chemistry. It helps everything go out better, especially even when you're cooking, something you can use from the chemistry set. The meniscus of a liquid is where it kind of does that double thing. I'll show you in a moment with the oil here. So this is me mixing my oil and my milk together first. Pour it, level it out on the table, and you see bottom of the meniscus. Now that I've added the oil and milk, time to add the vanilla, and then I'm going to take my eggs, put them in a separate bowl, and beat them first before adding it to the rest of my wet ingredients, trying to get a little bit more of a homogeneous solution before we add it to the dry mixture. I'm just going to pour my wet mixture into my dry, give it a good stir, and attach my whisk attachment to my stand mixer, and here we go. I'm going to start on a low speed and work my way up, as well as scraping along the sides and using my hand whisk as needed to get everything as homogeneous as I completely can. Once I get all the flour thoroughly coated with the wet mixture, I'm going to go ahead and have my boiling water ready. I have an electric kettle that I use. I need 1 cup of boiling water. For a double mixture, I need 2 cups, so I'm going to drizzle in slowly because we do have eggs in there and I don't want them to cook. So I'm just going to go slowly through. This is sped up, but yeah, I slowly drizzled that in. Now, I promised my son I would make him an Oreo cake because this was for his birthday. So what I just did here was I took a bunch of Oreos in my food processor and dumped them into the cake batter. I also crushed them up and put them into the frosting in between. But so this was just step 1 of crushing them up and putting them into the cake. It did make the cake a lot sweeter than it needed to be. It also messed up my cooking time. So instead of just being about 30 minutes till it was done, it took closer to 50 with the excess in it. If you wanted to add chocolate chips or something, you could easily. I'm just dividing my batter in half and gonna pop this into the oven. My oven's big enough for both of these to fit at the same time. And in they go. Alright, so 45 minutes later, they do not look pretty, but they tasted pretty good. Once the cakes were cooled, I cut them down so that they were perfectly the same size. So we had a good standard for the outside. This was me making my frosting for the middle. I had crushed up a bunch of Oreos, like I said earlier, to add into the center frosting, which was vanilla, to make it more Oreo for my son. And this is just me kind of decorating the cake. Maybe not the best. I'm not the best cake decorator, but you know, what do you do for your kid, right? There we go. Try to keep everything as even as I could so I didn't mess with anything. So yep, there it is. That's the deep dark chocolate cake. This is just me frosting it as best I could. I use store-bought frosting. If you really want to make your own frosting, easy buttercream frosting is just butter, milk, powdered sugar, and then you can add cocoa powder to make it chocolate. Not the best decorator, I try. And that's really about it. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.